And if you can't see us chat, that's fine. You're not even here yet. And also, we don't care. We're not going to start the video until 7 o'clock. Oh, yeah. Just kind of monitoring my Twitch to see if we just pop up suddenly. Live with 0 viewers. That's about what I expected. Let's see. And now I'm just going to check to see. Bye. Hello, hello.
Hello.
I can hear us, so that's exciting. Now I'm going to turn off my sound so that I don't distract myself. Oh, welcome to the chat room. Send a message. Hello. Zero chat. No. Hello, chat. Who's not there? Mary, do you know if you have anybody coming specifically?
The only person who might, because I don't, people I know don't, whether, I don't think we know Twitch. Maybe not, but I'm just.
So it might just be us chatting, and that's okay too, because I'm so interested in chatting with you. Also, what is that if you just put in the link, which is twitch.tv/CAZCooney, as far as I understand it, you don't need to log in or have an account. You can just listen to the stream like you would a podcast or radio or like streaming television. But if people want to participate in the chat, then they would get an account. Is that correct, Carlos, as far as you know? Yeah. So it's actually, oh, now I'm hearing my voice echo back. Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's just Twitch is funny, but I think it's easier in many ways than the Zoom events. So I think I can hear that echo still. Right. Okay. Mysterious.
I just need to turn it down some.
Do you want me to talk?
So I can, yeah, I can hear it, but it does echo.
Do you have earphones? Because last time when we both weren't wearing earphones, there was big echo, but when we put our earphones on, we were just fine, I think.
I'm gonna go get earphones. I'll be right back.
We'll see what happens. I think our chat guest Jim didn't have to put on earphones, Mary, so you may be off the hook. It may just be because Carlos and I are in the same space, even though there's a big
Yes.
hallway and a door between us.
Yes. Yeah. It's always a wonder how these things work. I do an event with SIFWA once every 3 months, and it's through their Zoom stuff. And it's a very arcane system, it seems to me, for people to log in, and they have trouble. But I can't do it because it's not my system. All I can say is point them at the right, but they still have to do a couple of different steps. They have to log into something else before they, to show that they're a SIFWA member or whatever before they.
What system would you use if you were going to run something?
Well, so I do have a book club of my own, which is very small. That's just me. I just send out Zoom links. I mean, I just send a Zoom link to the people who are coming, because it's not a last minute thing. You're meant to have read the book. So I can send, it's just send it by email.
So it's just a Zoom link and it's that simple.
Yes, it's that simple.
Nice. I like it.
Okay, I'm testing my own microphone right now and hoping for no echo.
I don't hear an echo.
No echo.
I think that fixed it. Okay.
Yay! Stupid headphones. What can you do? Mary, I was like, there's all these questions I want to ask you, but it probably would be better to save it for the actual
Yes.
stream. But what are you, I guess, looking forward to this summer? That's a good one.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Pittsburgh too, because we're going to be visiting. So maybe you can tell us where we should go.
Well, that depends a lot on what things you like. Um, so,
We like everything you like.
oh, well,
We are easily influenced by the grandmaster of science fiction and fantasy poetry.
I like the naturey things. So I like there's something called the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. I don't want to make out that any of these things that I'm about to mention are world class. Because for instance, I used to go to Kew Gardens. I lived near them when I was growing up. And that is world class. This is not world class, but I like the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. I like the Phipps, which is another more glasshouse based botanical garden space. And there are big parks and walks you can do. There's a zoo. It's not a world class zoo again, but it's a zoo. Yes. I mean, and the rivers, there are some nice walks by the rivers, and there's Mount Washington. You can go up an old incline, this strange contraption that takes you to the top of the slope and then look out over the city. It's a good city to live in. It's not really what I would call a tourist city.
We were there for, what were we there for, Carlos? One of the conventions. It was StokerCon. StokerCon was there a few years ago.
Yeah.
And we had a B&B on the top of the cliff. And we
Yes.
did take the contraption
Yes.
down at
Yes.
one point because it was super fun. But yeah, I love nature stuff too. I love hikes and river walks. That would be wonderful. We're interested in probably like, I love museums. I love industrial ruins. I love old factories.
A little bit away, there are industrial ruins that you can do hikes for, and there were a lot of steel mills. Some of the places you can see just like a little piece that they've left as a sort of historical exhibit.
Yeah.
I don't know of a place where they have set up a whole steel mill or something for you to tour. I don't think there's something like that. For museums, if you happen to like dinosaurs,
Okay.
that's the one thing that is kind of a world-class thing, but they're not, I'm like, oh, so yeah, pretty cool, but I'm not. We had, one guest who was like, oh my goodness, dinosaur. Yeah, the dinosaur.
If they were space dinosaurs, you'd like them.
Likewise, there's an Andy Warhol museum because Andy Warhol came from here. And so if he is your favorite artist, you'd probably be pretty excited. But otherwise, you're like, oh, Andy Warhol.
Yeah, so much, Andy.
Yes, exactly.
What about good eats?
I'm not really the right person to tell you that. So, I like Indian food, and I guess I prefer, this may be a non, I prefer British Indian food.
Sure.
So I support my local Indian restaurant because it's near me. And that was actually the food that I put away earlier, by the way, Garth. But I like the people who run it, but it's not, it's enjoyable, but it's not, I wouldn't travel to go to that Indian restaurant.
It's not what you crave.
No, there is a nice French patisserie that's about a mile away from where I live. That's pretty, the food looks lovely and tastes nice. So it looks great and it tastes good, but the appearance is just fabulous.
It's like A+ on aesthetics.
Yes.
When you go on family vacations, do you travel back to the UK often or go elsewhere?
We travel back to the UK, but not usually as our fun family vacation, because there's a lot of relatives to see. And actually, my husband will go and see his relatives once a year. And ideally, I'd go and see mine once a year, and they're not necessarily the same trip.
Right. That's a lot of relatives in a single trip, I would imagine.
Yeah, yes. So for fun, we normally go elsewhere. This year we're going to stay within the US because my son's boyfriend is worried that he won't get back in. He
Yeah.
has he has a visa. He should get back in. It shouldn't be a problem, but he's still anxious. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot of friends who are full citizens and are still very anxious to travel. So, so I hope that where you go is super beautiful and lots of great nature places to see.
Yes, that would be nice.
We're traveling for a couple conventions. We're going to the Origins Game Fair and Gen Con on the writing track for both, but Carlos will also be running games. We made a TTRPG that's currently stuck in China due to tariffs, but we're hoping it can get over here soon. But and then we're going to Confluence as well. We were thinking of going to the Worldcon, but then we thought it was just too much. And yeah, but I'm hoping that we'll get to do some more like New York local, a little bit upstate. There's so much to explore. I've lived here since 2017, but 2 years of that were pandemic, and mostly you're working, and then we spend our summers doing cons. So it would be fun to do more like a lot of beautiful sitting and writing, and then some exploratory journeys.
Yes, absolutely.
Ooh, Carlos, it is now 7 o'clock.
Okay, I'm gonna press record, and then I'm gonna play the little Fiction Impossible theme, and then we'll get started. Okay.
Right.
Here we go. Pressing record now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fiction Impossible. We're going to play this trailer that I made. Okay, yeah, here we go. Welcome, everybody. We're getting started today with Fiction Impossible. Although today is a special day where we're really going to be talking about Verse Impossible. We're going to be looking at Mary Sue Lee's verse novel. And we'll have a bunch of other stuff to talk about, too. Your host today is Claire Susanna Elizabeth Cooney. Claire, I'm moving us to the main layout, and I'm going to ask you to say hello.
Hello! This is Mary's novel in verse, and it's so good, and you're going to read it.
It's a requirement.
And then here's Mary Sue Lee.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome, Grand Master of Science Fiction and Fantasy Association, Poetry Association.
Hello, thank you. And this is the book. I'm going to read from this book for a few minutes when the reading time comes. Thank you.
Is the time now? Carlos. Tailkin is here. Yay! Hi, Tailkin. I'm checking all the chat on my phone since my computer can't handle the golden weight of having Twitch and Zoom up at the same time. Well, Mary, before you start reading, could you tell us like the basic blurb or premise? I would tell them, but I love spoilers so much that I call them spicers. So I would just tell them everything. And then people would be like, no, you've just spoiled it for me, and cry. And I would feel like, but don't you love it the way I love it, like cake? So what's the elevator pitch for Sign of the Dragon?
I don't know if it's going to really be an elevator pitch as such, but I will spoil the first poem. The book is about a guy called Zhao who is chosen in the first poem by a dragon to be the king. And he's very young when he's chosen. He's 16 years old, and it's basically the story of his reign, I guess. And there are lots of bad things that happen, but also, some nice things, lots of people who become friends, etc. Monsters and demons, and one of the monsters is a good guy.
I think I've met him.
I was just going to say that on the back cover you allude to many of the classic Western epics. The Iliad and Beowulf. It feels to me like it's very Beowulfian in that it really sort of like charts the trajectory of a king. But Claire, you had a different comp title that you wanted to give.
I have two comp titles that weren't Beowulf. It's Beowulfian in that Journey of a King from Boy King to death, although I haven't read to the end yet, Mary, so don't tell me if he dies. I'm just assuming because that's the way of a king's reign. But I have read Once and Future King by T.H. White and also Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. And both of those that reflect, I think, the Zhao, is that how you say his name?
Well, any way you want to. I normally say Zhao, but I don't
Zhao.
think I'm saying it correctly. Whatever. If you spoke to someone who spoke Chinese, which I do not, they could probably they'd say anyhow, which character did you mean to represent this thing? But,
right. And there would be tonalities that I would have to listen very closely even to catch the haunting tone of. So Zhao, like the Goblin Emperor and Arthur of T.H. White's Once and Future King, is so gentle, and his superpower is really decency, and which is not Beowulf's superpower. No. Beowulf is super hot and has very strong hands. but I love this. We were just at a panel on Saturday, and one of the things we're talking about is why monarchy and fantasy. And as I'm reading, I'm thinking, why do we keep writing about kings? But I think that part of writing about a king is writing either a reflection of the world and the leadership in metaphor, which is where you get a lot of bad kings or corrupt kings or something to fight against, or that like fantasy wish fulfillment of what would I love to see in a leader. And I feel like Zhao is much more that leader of like gentleness. So tell me about before you read, did it start with Zhao? Like, did you have his reign in your head?
Well, it started with the single first poem. I wrote the first poem and I meant it to be a standalone poem, but I thought about it and I came back to it, and then I wrote a few more poems about the character, and then I was hooked and I was doomed.
What a beautiful doom. That's a great note for you to read us those first few poems. I would love to hear that.
I will make a side note about the Goblin Emperor. Other people have, they use the word cinnamon roll, and they say that the main characters are both cinnamon rolls in both books. And also that I read the Goblin Emperor after the first poem had been published. And indeed, the first poem was published before the Goblin Emperor. I was very glad that it got published before the whole Goblin Emperor thing, because I was like, oh, well, there are points of similarity here, but fortunately.
Oh, and not in I wouldn't say they're not at all twins, but I was thinking, I could think like Arthur, T.H. White's Arthur, Goblin Emperor Kai, is that his name? And Zhao would just be like BFFs, and they'd be like, oh, war? No, let's go strolling in the wildflower field with our beautiful wives, or kiss baby toes, or like go fly kites. Oh my gosh, that kite scene just killed me. So there's a kite scene, everyone, a kite poem that is perfect. All right, yes. But I wanted Kai and Zhao to be friends because I think they would understand each other, and they, it's so rare that I think two fictional monarchs meeting each other are surprised by each other's decency.
So before I read this poem, it does have an illustration by Gary McCluskey, and I was very lucky to be able to get an illustrated version of this book.
So beautiful.
Which made me very happy. And also, I ought to definitely say that this poem first appeared in Starline back in 2013. And at the time it was published in Starline, I had probably only written 5 of these poems. I'd written this poem, I sent it to Starline, she accepted it, she published it. This is F.J. Bergman, who I owe a lot to, and she published it very soon after I sent it to her. So anyway, she's partly—
That's very encouraging.
If she hadn't been enthusiastic, I might not have felt, oh, well, this is worth continuing. So we'll see. Interregnum. 16 years old, 4th son, still they sent him to the mountain together with his brothers before their father's body stiffened. The kingdom suspended without a king. 4 princes, 1 crown, a crown he had no use for, a crown of war, alliances, duty. He slept on straw near his horse, displacing the stable boy, waited for his eldest brother to return triumphant, ready for the throne. Then brother after brother vanished into rock and ice and cloud. The steward took his sword, his shield, sent him out at dusk. No torch, no guide, no horse, no servant, no food, no water. Snow deepened under his boots. He waded through drifts, fell once, twice. The wind mocked him. He thought of the warm stable, the bed of straw, his horse, sleep. But sleep meant death, so he stumbled on. The wind called his brother's names. He shouted back his own name. The wind laughed. Snow fell. He walked half blind. Sleet kissed his forehead. The wind said, sleep. He sang to drown it, sang hymns, nursery songs, drinking songs, dirges, ballads, marching tunes, the love songs his mother had favoured. She, who was bartered for peace to a man she'd never met. He fell, pushed himself upright, saw a black cloud speed against the wind. She landed beside him, her breath ash, snow steaming from her wings. He knelt, but did not beg, and asked after his brothers. One slept, one fought, one pissed himself. They didn't taste like kings. She laughed. And you? What will you pay for a crown, little princeling? Nothing. I don't want it. She flamed, and he saw himself reflected in her scales, a kneeling, shivering boy. Then why, she asked, are you here? Because they sent me. He stopped. No, he was so tired he couldn't think. Because the kingdom needs a king. He struggled to his feet. And what will you pay for the crown, little princeling? Gold? Men? A song? My freedom, he shouted at her. Well, she said, that's a start. Years later, on a spring morning, his queen asked, greatly daring, about the woman whose name he cried in his sleep. Not a woman, he said, his heart on the mountain where he entered his kingship. So,
Got chills. Sorry, gotta just rub the mouth. Woo!
it's the end of the first one, and that was meant to be it, but it wasn't. I kept writing poems. I didn't write them in order, so I will read the next few in the book as they occur. But you know, this second poem was not written second. I think this one might have been like the 100th poem that I wrote, as it happens.
Okay, wow. So you didn't write them in order. That was a question I was going to ask. Like, as you start accumulating them, like it occurred to you to slip them in between.
Yes. I mean, there were some events in which several of the poems were written in order, but even with the events, I often went back in and slipped one in. But we can get so one of the things that is true about the book is that the bodyguards of the king play a major supporting role. So
Yes.
The second poem takes us, and the third poem are both.
I love them. I have favorites, but you know, they change.
Oh, that's okay. Guarded. Waking that first morning in the king's bed, his bed, dawn brightening the paper windows, Zhao saw the guard, Gan, standing in the same position he had been in when Zhao fell asleep. Had he stood there all night, or silently paced the room? What if he had needed to piss? Zhao didn't know what to say, but he would not say nothing. Zhao got out of bed, bowed to Gan, poured a cup of water. Thank you. Are you thirsty? Gan stared at the boy, the king, standing there in his pajamas, holding out a cup of water to him, the guard. A small thing, but the boy's father had never done it. Thank you, Your Majesty. Gan bowed back, took the cup, drank. So that's the end of the second poem. And I suppose I will say, Zhao is the kind of leader that I would like there to be. So it's not very helpful because there's no dragons around to pick a good leader for me.
Just the dragon of the general population, which could go either way.
Yeah, crowdsourced dragon, not nearly as discerning.
So this is the third poem, and it's another of Zhao's guards, the one in charge. Training waits. Sung, used to masking his reactions so opponents did not anticipate his moves, showed none of his disappointment as he assessed the boy who would be both his charge and his student. 16 years old, close to full height, but the boy could not even lift the medium weight bar. Clear then to Sung that the boy was not his father's equal, was not his brother's equal, unmuscled, overlooked, fourth son, now king. The boy, Zhao, struggled to hold the lightest bar, sheened in sweat, arms trembling, but at least he held it, didn't use his newfound rank to demand a rest. Small consolation to carry away when training was done, when Sung instructed the guards who would protect the boy for the rest of the day, when Sung himself returned to his darkened room and burned incense for Zhao's father, the weight of that loss hard to lift. It's the end of the third poem.
Oh, Sung, you don't even know, Sung. You don't even know how much you're going to love this king.
He does
Spoilers.
he might or might not change his mind.
You're right.
About
You're
that.
right. He may not change his mind ever about how much he loves his king.
So the third, the fourth, what are we at? The fourth poem is a little different. This one first appeared in a little, well, I don't know, maybe little isn't correct. It appeared in a literary magazine, but it wasn't a non-major literary magazine called Red Rock Review. Succession. One king dead, a new one crowned. The royal court seething with rumors, fibs, fears, fancies, phantasms, fictions. Gossip for innkeepers, beer drinkers, wine merchants, vintners, sots, soldiers, servants, slatterns, strumpets. Mothers name their sons for the new king. Little girls name toys after him. Little boys crown themselves with twigs. The royal bees in the royal hives huddle in clusters, shivering, waiting for spring, ignorant of kings. So that's the end of that one, which is moving way out to the general population. Okay, so I'm going to read one more if that's okay, and this will be the last one. This would be better read by someone who was like an actor, but never mind. What it is a poem in which we hear Zhao's piece of what are actually various conversations, but we only hear what he says and, you know, who he's talking to, but we don't hear the other side of the conversation. Grief. The new king to his steward. Is it required that we visit our father's grave? Then we choose not to. To the guildmaster, we may be young, but we are old enough to count. Where are the missing barrels? To his tailor, take it in an inch. To the palace barber, for such little stubble as we have, we prefer to shave ourselves. To the captain of his guard, late at night, secure the stables. Let Kayat, the boy who sleeps there, let him be. Thank you. To Kayat, the stable boy, it's all right, stay. We are no different than we were a month ago when you helped us muck out Mitch's stall. To his generals, how many cavalry at that outpost? To his senior advisor, we will fight for them, if necessary, die for them, but we will not weep for their approval. To the captain of his guard, another night, check the stables, let Kayat stay, thank you. To Kayat, the stable boy, you're welcome. Your old blankets were more holes than blanket. Good. Her near front fetlock? Mitcher likes the snow. To his generals, if they attack, what options remain? To his senior advisor, we will fight for them, die for them. It appears we will even consider marrying for them. On being shown the portraits of his dead brothers, give them to our sister. To Kayat the stable boy, let us help you with that. To a visiting envoy, perhaps we are of an age to marry. To his tutor, war looms, lessons are done. To Kayat the stable boy, we are angry, not sad. Our father should have warned them. No, we are fine. We will be fine. No, we miss our brothers. To his tailor, take it in again. We were too fat before. To Kayat, 4 years later, we never thanked you for your kindness. Thank you. And that's the end of that one, which is really, I mean, yeah, again, be better if Claire read it, really. It's
No.
okay.
I think like the poet in your own voice and like in this time and place, it is like legacy stuff. It's precious.
Yeah.
Because we need this.
That said, Claire, there was this particular poem that you wanted to read.
Okay, but I want to tell you why I wanted to read it. Carlos and I were talking about how this book in particular feels so, I use the word cinematic because I was thinking of like film specifically. Carlos kind of said it's more like TV, but in my head it's all the same thing because it's not only episodic, but it's like the way you can zoom in small to a bee in a hive and then like jump forward 4 years later or go to the edges, the borderlands and have like an opinion there. I just love all of that, the kind of the accretion disc. I haven't read many Mosaic novels, but and I've read some like novels in verse, but it was just struck me that the one time I participated in adapting a piece for film or creating a film script. Carlos and I were both new to the media, and he was like, it's so amazing because it's half how-to manual and half poetry, where you're writing to woo the cinematographer or director into seeing something that they're going to be compelled to shoot. And this book kind of does it all for you. It's pretty amazing. And one of there's a piece where a catastrophe happens. I won't tell you what kind. The king is injured, among many other people. The king has so many save the cat moments too. It's like, you know, you like a hero because he saves the cat. He saves all the cats all the time.
All the cats. Every cat.
It's
Every
a
single
powder.
cat. All cats must be saved.
Yeah, like literal cats, and then also everybody else who's a cat. And so he's injured and he's in danger of getting his left hand amputated. And the surgeon, you know, he's like, if you can fight off the fever, we won't have to. But it's very clear that the fever is not going to be fought off. And a woman, like a cleaning woman, has come into the tent, and she has other interesting things she can do. In her one poem that you get this view of the cleaning woman and this awesome interaction she has with one of the guards, Gon, who we've met. But she must have said something, not in the poem, but between that poem and the next, to the doctor, because it influences the doctor's decision on how to treat the king. And so there's this wonderful little poem called Cure. I just have to find the page it's on. It's not like oh,
93.
Thank you. Page 93. Oh yeah, there it is. So in between Peng's poem, The Cleaning Woman, and this poem, Cure, I think I'm interpreting it as that Peng, you know, mumbled something to the doctor. So just keep that in mind. Cure. Not healing herb, nor dragon's wing, nor surgeon's skill, nor serpent's sting, nor spell, nor ghost that healed the king, but that the surgeon, tired, distraught, still heard the mumbling woman out. Abandoned pride, considered, thought. 100 hook-mouthed maggots mined the king's fouled flesh, devoured, dined. A feast that left no taint behind. So he must have listened to some advice. The maggots cleaned the king's wound, and he didn't lose his hand. That is a spoiler, but that's okay. Lots of other terrible things happened to him, so you don't have to worry that that one time he was given a reprieve by maggots. But I just loved that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
one of the
appreciate
things
that.
one of the things I really love is it reminded me of the fact that in contemporary hospitals they'll keep leeches because leeches are great for cleaning up internal wounds and bruises and things like that. So what's old is new.
Yeah.
Medical maggots.
I mean, there's a lot of fantasy with magical healing, and I mean, unless it's the center of the book, sometimes the character is a magical healer, and that's slightly different. But it's often, it seems to me, just it's an uneasy balance between, oh, somebody has been miraculously saved, and oh, this time the spell won't work because the author wants to kill off the character. And I'm like,
Right. I love that there's these moments where you've got kind of prose poems and then or like all dialogue poems, or the battle poems, or at least the ones I've read so far, are so cool because there are these flashes of perspective of different soldiers from different sides, aftermath scenes with the wounded, what people talked about 100 years later, what, and it's just so epic. It's so cool. But then occasionally you'll write a really short poem, turn to rhyme and meter, and just like it's very playful. It might be a nursery rhyme. It might be something like titled innocuously Demon Flame, a jump rope rhyme. And you're like, oh, that's cute, like our Ring Around the Rosy or whatever. No, it's foreshadowing. What were you going to say, Carlos?
Oh, no. Just to pick up on that too. And sometimes it's dramatic monologue, which is very much sort of like The Office, but set in a very different kind of setting, where all of a sudden the camera will shine on the Dragon Slayer and the Dragon Slayer will just start talking. So one of the questions I had for you, Mary, was sort of like, how do you imagine the interlocutor who is delivering this story to us? I know we have multiple perspectives. We have first-person perspectives. We have third-person perspectives. But I guess I'm talking more in an sense about like the viewpoint that this book delivers its narratives, all of them, to us. Who is the archivist who's assembled all of these primary documents, or the historian who's gathered them together, or none of these things? It's something else.
There's none of them. It isn't meant to be a put together thing that Homer wrote this years later about the Trojan War. It's just the things themselves, which do tell you some stuff in some cases about the distant future later on, much further than you've got, I think. There are some poems written where you hear what the king's senior counselor says about events, but the poems, he's talking to someone who is trying to create a history, or an archivist or something about important events, and so this guy, that's a little bit closer to somebody trying to assemble a thing for the future. But as it is, it's not meant to be that there is any particular person who's assembled this set of poems.
Oh yeah,
Idea.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to follow up because I don't think there is one, and I never got the impression that there was one. I was more thinking sort of like in a wider sort of like approach as you as the author assembling this. I still get an opinion. That is, this is not neutral narration. This is not neutral curation of what appears there. And so, like, I guess I'm wondering about the authorial opinion that is still not you, that is informing how this is assembled.
It is trying to tell the story of a heroic kingship. Heroic not in the sense of him being a great warrior. After a lot of effort, he becomes a decent warrior, but he's never a world-class Beowulf or Achilles type warrior. Um, Instead, it's, he's self-sacrificing, but he's thoughtful. He listens to people, he makes allies, that kind of thing. So it's the story of his life, but we get to see how it affects small characters as well as major historical figures.
What I like, okay, if I were the cinematographer, then my interlocutor perspective would be the dragon asleep at the top of the mountain where her magic is the strongest, dreaming the dreams of the kingdom, like dreaming, like
Yes.
right, like eavesdropping because
Beautiful.
she's obviously connected.
Yes.
Her life is a lot
Connected.
longer,
She is
and
connected to her. It's funny
because
because
she
I'm totally never going to write a sequel, and I actually don't think I'm ever going to write. I could imagine writing a
don't say
sequel,
it.
but I, I, I'm much closer, which is not close at all, to writing a prequel, and the continuing character would be the dragon, and it would be 600 years earlier or something. But she would be the one, yes, who was in them both. Yeah.
She mentions in one of the poems how long her memory is and like
Yes.
how quickly humans forget, but that's because her memory is like eons big. And
Yes.
so like in some point, like in a way, then she's a God point of view. And I wonder, because you've got making, is that, I don't know how you pronounce it in your head. I know that it's fantasy, but
Yeah.
I would love to hear how you pronounce it in your head.
Pretty much like that, yes.
Making and Innis are two of the countries at war, and Innis is very Ireland coded. The names like Declan and Donald, or like Gaelic coded,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
warriors and the kings are very much more Beowulfian and barbarian. You know, bellicose darlings, and then you've got Making where it's more China coded, it feels like.
Yes.
And but except they share marchlands, and each of them have invaded each other multiple times. When our boy king comes in, he's like inherited the 38th war. So it's like it's this no new thing, it is constant. But what I notice is that the magic of Making seems to be allied spiritually with horses, and the magic of Innis is allied spiritually with wolves. And there's also a dragon. I don't know if they both have a dragon or it's the same dragon over both, but I like the idea of these three gods, like a wolf god, a horse god, and a dragon god. How they would, like, a wolf god or a horse god might have a totally different opinion looking at these, like at these events or events that lead up to it. And like the horse and the wolf might be in opposition, but the dragon might have a more overarching view, being the longer lived or the more snooty. I don't know. But I was going to ask, we've got a couple examples of horse magic. I've only seen one example of wolf magic so far, and I don't want to spoil any of that. Do you imagine in Making the horse magic is something that is like one in a million, and it obviously it doesn't matter if you're a peasant or king, you might be born with it, or is it something that the horses choose, or does it seep up from the land? Like, how are you imagining that magic at work?
Yes. Not as rare as one in a million, probably, but rare. I think it's very important that the horses are choosing, but the magic is that the horses know what you want, so they can choose. They don't know what most people want, at least not in a dramatic, detailed way. They know that if you pull the rein this way, you want one thing, but not in this supernatural way. Very few people, but he isn't the only person it's ever happened to. And I mean, that is, Zhao is not the only person that the horses have been able to hear, but their choice to follow him is, a choice that each horse makes individually. And the dragon is not an actual god. She's just very, very powerful, but her power, there's one point in the book at least where it says this, but it's maybe not said often, maybe only in the one place. Her power is linked to the region that she rules over. And
Super local.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. So she can sense Zhao when he's very, very far away, but she doesn't have power over that distance.
Yeah, he has to go to her if he wants something.
Yeah. And the Gaelic / Asian thing is because as I was writing the poems, before I thought it through, they just came out that way. And I'm sure it's because my father was Chinese and my mother was Irish. And so they just were the first things that I could pull out when I was trying to pull out names and so on.
It was beautiful. I had wondered that too. It's like this beautiful big metaphor being worked out on the page too. And
Yeah.
And not a little difficulty, but also not without great splendor and achievement in the middle. Because I haven't finished it yet, but I am looking forward to it. Have you read? There's Sherry Thomas's. She has a duology that it's a Chinese woman and a British man, and it's a romantic duology, but it's full of like it's like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon meets Jane Austen.
No, but it sounds great.
I'm gonna send you the titles for this. I think it's called There's My Beautiful Enemy is One, and something about a blade. I will look that up and tell you in a second. But Carlos, should we start the speaking of what we love to read section?
Oh, let's hold on for a second because I had another question.
Oh, sure, go for it.
And specifically, this is a gorgeous volume that you have here, including magnificent full-page illustrations, many and multiple, and so lovingly and carefully done. Can you tell me a little bit about just how you worked with your illustrator to...
Oh, it's so great. I mean, so it's one person. His name is Gary McCluskey, and he had illustrated actually some of these poems, but the illustrations are not in the book for these poems. That they appeared first in a magazine called Heroic Fantasy Quarterly, and several of these poems, that was where they first appeared, and he did illustrations for them. And later, when I came to the point that I was looking for an illustrator, partly at the suggestion of the Heroic Fantasy Quarterly editor, I picked Gary McCluskey, who had done these illustrations. And it was just simpler not to try and worry about the rights, to get the rights to the ones that were in Heroic Fantasy Quarterly. So he did 40 new illustrations, and it was great. I sent him, probably about 3 poems at a time, and I didn't do them sequentially, which in retrospect maybe would have been the right way, but the way we did it, picked 3 poems and he worked on them. I would say, well, he had the whole book, but this is the poem, and then I would sometimes say, well, I would like the illustration to include Zhao's son, because I wanted over the 40 pictures to cover the characters that I was interested in depicting. So I would direct him to which character to include or something some of the time, or tell him there weren't many things I was set on, but for some reason, which isn't even clear to me, and it's in that one of those poems that I just read, it was very important to me that Zhao didn't have a beard. I don't know why that was important to me. Anyhow, so
That's his little bit about the Boy King thing,
Yeah, well, he's a boy when he starts, and he could have grown a beard later, but I'm like, no
Well,
beard.
it sounds like when he tries, he looks like a goat. There's a line like that. So naturally, he's going to keep himself clean shaven. I would if I were that Boy King.
But I mean, he did such great work. I just love it. Yes. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think I own the rights to the poems, but the pictures, but it seems somehow wrong to show all the pictures here. You should have to get, I don't know, but however.
That's Sung and Moonswan, isn't it? I really love their Twilight romance a great deal.
That's the enemy king on his horse.
Donal.
Yes, exactly. So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little teaser there to encourage people to see that, but just it gives it that epic feel as well, So with the epics that when I grew up reading them, they often had those illustrated scenes, yes. And it just puts me in a very beautiful childlike place, and I just love that part of it.
Yeah, I feel really, really grateful that that was possible to do. So.
Oh my gosh. So Mary, I emailed you the name of that duology, which is the Heart of the Blade duology. So I think you'll really love it. It's super fun. I mean, I don't know if you read a lot of romances, but it has that, but it's also a lot of good combat and, China versus Britain, but also spies, and it's very great.
So yeah. should we jump in and talk about things that we're enjoying reading? Maybe
Yeah.
Mary, if you've got anything to get us started with.
So this was the question that caused me the greatest difficulty because I love reading, and so okay, so I'm going. These are the two books I'm not going to talk about. I just read. This is the book I finished most recently. A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. It's a great book. It's a great book. It's
I read it.
wonderful. Yes, and it has, it has a lot of things, but among them it has, like a 51-year-old woman with a wonky knee who is still fabulous, fabulous.
So good.
And this is a novella that I'm also not going to talk about called The Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain by Sophia Samatar. Not sure.
Oh, I didn't know she had a new one out.
And it is, oh, well, it's fantastic. I mean, I can see that it's probably not everybody's cup of tea, but it was my cup of tea. It's at the literary end of science fiction, and it becomes increasingly literary as it goes on, in my view.
Carlos, I think you're going to dig that.
100%.
And it's set on a spaceship, but there are clear, to me, at least to me, it seems like it's echoing slave ships. Anyway, the book that I'm going to talk about, because it had the biggest impact on me, is a book that I don't think would have a huge impact on many people. It just really, there was a particular scene in it, which I probably can't even call out. It's called To Fire Called. It's by a guy called Nathan Lowell. And it is the 8th story that he has about this character called Ishmael Wang. It's also on a spaceship. Most of the 8 books, this is not the last book about the character, but at the point of book 8, most of them are nice people being nice to each other. It's a very, not a lot of battles, no aliens. It's very low key, probably too low key for a large class of readers. But he is a nice guy. He starts off as a very young, nice guy, and he ends up making coffee. That's one of the things that he has to do on this spaceship. I mean, he's working in the the part of the ship that feeds people. Anyway, in this 8th book, he is depressed, and I read it. I guess the world seemed depressing, and I felt glum, and the character is glum. And there's a scene in it where he's glum, and I'm like, yes, you're right. I am glum. It's true. I'm glum. Yes, it's not just random, I mean, it's like a sort of epiphany. I mean, I knew I was glum, but it really said to me, you are glum. And also, but you could paint the walls of your office another color. You could do something. You don't just have to sit there saying glum. So as I say, it really, I would say most readers would like, well, a large number of readers, not most, would like A Sorceress Comes to Call. And then there'd be another class of readers, pretty large, but not as large maybe, who would love this book. I think the number of people who would love this book rather than like it might be quite small, but it really, really.
Can I, will you have had to have read the first 7 in order to really get to, it feels like in a large symphony, it's a movement of a large symphony, and that that movement was earned by 7 movements before, and that feeling of catharsis and keyed into the character was maybe partly came from all of the books that came before.
Partly. And book 7, actually, he's already depressed. It just doesn't, it's much more immediate. He's depressed because the bad thing is much more recent to him. But in book 8, he's still depressed, even though things are better. And it's also realistic, it's like, I've had, my parents die or whatever, and it's not, in the moment, it's just like, it's book 7.
Yeah.
But then eventually it's book 8,
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm so glad that the right book found you at the right time. I started Sorceress Come to Call, and I didn't think it was quite the right time. I also started it as an audiobook, and I realized anew, which I often realize, is that I really just enjoy reading it on the page first, and then re-experiencing it as an audiobook, as an interpretation, but not my first, because if it's my first time, I have to listen with my whole being, which means I have to find
Yes.
8 hours of chores to do or more.
Mhm.
But whereas if it's my second time, I can kind of fall asleep to it or listen to it idly, but it's not like that whole concentration. But then when I finally got to the page, I was able to read it much more quickly. I sort of got all the connections to the fairy tales. The Goose Girl, I think, was part of what it was
Yes.
based on, and but also because it is a little glum, especially when you switch POVs from the 50-year-old to the
Yes,
younger
the
girl.
14-year-old.
And it's sort of like, well, when you're listening to it, that glumness just lasts a really long time, whereas you're reading it, you're like, okay, what an hour long chapter listening in that intense abusive space
Yeah.
becomes like 10 minutes to read that chapter, and
Yes.
that really makes a difference to my emotional well-being.
Yes. No, totally. And I agree. Um, I always review books compulsively, and I felt like the 50-year-old character was a top-notch book for me, and the 14-year-old character wasn't as good a book. There was a clear difference to me in how much I was enjoying the two halves, partly because the 14-year-old is, as you say, very glum. But yeah.
Yeah, and trapped, and like when they finally meet, that union of 50-year-old and 14-year-old, where the 14-year-old suddenly sees there's another way of being. There are other sorts of older women in the world than her narcissistic
Yes.
mother. Like that is a beautiful thing, and it's earned, and it like, and we need the whole book, but certainly I'm all for like rather I could have followed that 50-year-old woman anywhere,
Yes.
very much like Cordelia
Yeah.
Borkosigan loved when
Yes.
she got her whole book by
Yes.
herself.
Yes. Yes.
What about you, Carlos? What have you been reading?
Well, I was just reminded of a book that is nonfiction that I just think is super important. So I just kind of like want to put it out there. I teach at the CUNY Graduate Center in a program called the ITP, Interactive Technology and Pedagogy. And today we were listening to final presentations, and I was reminded of Safiya Noble's book, which is called Algorithms of Oppression. It was written in 2018. And the more I think about it, the more important I think it is, where Noble just systematically goes through and shows the bias built into algorithms. That is the
Mhm.
algorithms of search, the algorithms that are now powering generative AI and all sorts of AI, not just generative. But the fact that we don't escape prejudices just because we are typing into code, and in fact, the opposite happens.
Ah,
So like it's the postmodern argument realized, where postmodernism really argued for a kind of radical subjectivity that is inescapable, that is echoed in other things too. Like, Thoreau begins by saying every book is dishonest that doesn't identify its I narrator, because
ah.
every book is an I. And so it's just this radical subjectivity that we often try to obfuscate through the illusion of, oh, well, we can be more neutral, we can remove
Yeah.
ourselves, lies,
Yeah.
lies, lies. And so, I was just thinking again of just how systematically and important this book is, and it's paved the way for a whole branch of scholarship in the digital humanities
Right.
about that specific topic. And I was just listening
Yeah.
to some great presentations today about that as well. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
kind of like put that out in the zeitgeist and say, if you haven't visited Algorithms of Oppression at this point, you know technology moves so quickly that parts of it might feel just like a little bit dated and that sort of thing. But it's so fundamental and important that we're reading something about the ways in which algorithms are meant to, control narratives with agendas behind them.
Right. And even if no agenda is intended, and I agree, algorithms change. So they may, ideally, people will correct them when they realize there's a problem. But, certainly the initial attempts at facial recognition were very race-based. I mean, race-biased. It was not neutral, right? And so it's problematic if you don't realize that there could be a problem.
Oh,
And if you realize, yes,
yeah, definitional is what I would say. It basically
yes,
guides culture. The student that I was watching was looking at the ways in which ChatGPT will convert plots for what she was terming lesbian cinema, lesbian movies, and the ways in which all of a sudden these movies that are meant for one audience, for women who identify as lesbians, will fall under the male gaze, when ChatGPT runs it through. So she would be like, create a poster for this movie that is about two hockey playing lesbians, and the actual poster has these two women, wearing full hockey gear, kind of like staring at each other in a very powerful kind of way. And once it got processed through ChatGPT, they were in little Christmas dresses that were high above the knee with fringe on them, kind of like staring, and they both had ice skates on, and it was just the darlingest, prettiest thing,
Thick.
Yes.
Ew.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a sort of thing that's like, that's 2025. She's been doing this project over the course of this semester. She's writing about it now. So it continues. it continues.
Yeah.
I've
Absolutely.
been reading for blurbing for a while. I think I'm on my last book that I've been asked to blurb for a while, and I'm maybe going to say no for the rest of the summer. Last summer I took a good several months off and it was really great, but I just finished a beautiful novella or short novel called Nothing in the Basement by Romy Stott, who I think you
Oh,
probably know.
I know her. Yes. Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, not
Ro-
in person, but over email. And she's one of the editors at Strange
She's
Horizons.
the
Yeah.
poetry editor at Strange
Yeah.
Horizons. And in fact, I think you and me and Romy may or may not have been on a panel together at one point. But it's a horror novel. It's one of those haunted house novels. It is very uh, wry or like ironic, and like a really close look at a middle-aged middle class couple in a house that's falling apart, like
Mm.
classic The Money Pit, but with because Romy's a poet and a filmmaker, the way in which it's told, like you can describe it like that in two sentences, but the feeling it gives you and the way in which it's told is that these normal household things keep happening, except that when you know that, so say the basement floods, but when you know it's malicious, when you know
Mm.
it's sentient, and you know that worse things are to come, a brangle with your husband, the dog's barking, like when all of that suddenly is infused with just that frisson of fear, and then that accumulates as like accretion disc of uneasiness, where silly things or things you could write off as funny or just petty even, but these petty little things growing large in the way of a Shirley Jackson
Mm.
novel, where like the first third of The Haunting of Hill House is so jubilant and ebullient and like luminous and light filled and happy, and yet there's this like ache of like apprehension the whole time, and well earned. But I'd forgotten when I reread Haunting of Hill House how that freedom and giddiness was so beautiful and full of light, and that the shift to something else is so gradual, but she sets it up in the first paragraph of the book, so it's also always there with you, and then
Mm.
you're made to forget, and then it creeps back in like through air, through breathing. And I feel like Romy Stott's Nothing in the Basement is like that. Like at some point I thought this is a short book, but it is so relentless, and you're like your shoulders are so high where just these little things are happening, and anyway, I'm looking forward to finishing my blurb for it, and I look forward to it being out in the world. Nothing in the Basement by Romy Stott.
Awesome. Should we just spend a few minutes? We only have a few minutes left, but should we spend a few minutes talking about games that we like to play?
Games, yeah.
I think next time we'll probably have a little bit to say about Claire Obscura. Claire and I just started playing Expedition 33. And I also, in a future episode, want to talk about Grand Theft Auto 6, maybe jumping the animation shark. Insofar as it's so realistic, they just should have made a freaking movie at this point. Like it's got to be cheaper. They've got these
Yeah.
actors in mocap that they're filming so that then they
Yes.
can put them in a
Yes.
model, but the models are so realistic and they cover everything that they might as well just use the actor and skip the mocap and
Except
$300 billion.
but if they do that, it will be cheaper, but it will not, like, much more people. Video games make more money than movies, and yeah, you might like make those actors in a film, but it's not fully immersive the way a video game is.
Oh,
And
no, no, but I mean, make the video game, but just use
With
actors.
actors.
You know,
Yes. With
just
actors.
so it's like how can we just skip the middleman at this point and just have the actors acting out what we want. Anyway, for another time, I think, Mary, you have a couple of board games that you
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
play.
Well, yes, I actually love playing board games. But the board game that I've been playing the most recently is this game. It's called Ark Nova, and it is a game in which you build a zoo. So, well, I love animals. So, it's just a conceit that appeals to me. You can have the elephant or the llama or the alpaca or the giant panda or whatever. And I actually have a really soft spot. Well, it's really for Wanakos, but by extension to llamas and alpacas. So I can't play this game optimally unless I'm very disciplined, because if I see the alpaca, I want the alpaca. Even if it's not advantageous to have the alpaca, I want that alpaca. So I get tempted. But yes, you are building a zoo, you have a little map, and you create enclosures. The elephant needs a bigger enclosure than a parrot. And it's very addictive, and it works well as a two-player game, which a lot of board games are not so great when you play them as a two-player game. But this one seems to be pretty well designed, or possibly Andrew and I are just roughly the same degree of lack of ability at it. So that, it's a toss-up who'll win. And because there's sort of, it's one of these things where you get more powerful as you grow, as you go into the game. You have more income and so on. So sometimes in the last move or two, someone will overtake the other person, seemingly reversing the fortunes in a very satisfying way, unless you're the one being crushed.
What's oh, sorry, go for it.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask I may have missed it, what the main mechanic is.
Okay, so the problem with that question is that I understand what you're asking, and I know that, for instance, Dominion is a deck building game, but I only vaguely know these kinds of terms. So
does it say on the front?
Oh, well, I was going to say, I looked this up on Board Game Geek.
Have some cards, but you only have a few cards at a time. Yes, go ahead. You looked it up, Carl.
I did. I looked it up on Board Game Geek. So each player has a set of 5 action cards to manage their gameplay, and the power of an action is determined by the slot the card currently occupies. So it sounds like there's placement aspects to it and card management. The cards in question are: cards allow you to gain new zoo cards. Build allows you to build standard or special enclosures, kiosks, and pavilions. Animals, you accommodate animals in your zoo. Association allows your association workers to carry out just different tasks. So it sounds like a little worker placement. And then sponsors allows you to play a sponsor card in your zoo or to raise money. So yeah, it sounds like a kind of like a medium weight kind of Euro that you're sort of like managing these resources and mostly looking out for llamas.
Did you know on Board Game Geek there is a subcategory called mechanisms, and it lists action queue, endgame bonuses, grid coverage, hand management, hexagon grid, income, increased value of unchosen resources, open drafting, set collection, solo/solitaire game, tags, tile placement, variable player powers, and variable setup. I didn't know it had this. I don't know what half those terms mean, Mary.
That
but
was a heck of a list. It sounded
a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
it is a lot of stuff. It's not just one thing going on, I guess. And that's
it's almost a pattern song.
You can play with more than 2 people, of course, but it's just that that is the most common thing, is that there are just 2 of us playing. There are lots of other games we like, especially when there are more than 2 of us, like Terraforming Mars is a particular favorite. We play card games. I mean, card games with actual cards, like poker or whatever. Not with just 2 of us, though. And well, there's not really time. And then there are sort of word-based ones, like paperback, where you're building words. That's cute.
We don't know paperback. Carlos, what's our favorite word game that you backed on Kickstarter? That kind of that trivia, but League of.
Oh yeah.
It's like League of the Lexicon. Is that what it's called?
That's it. You got it.
And there's a game called Bananagrams, which often works when we have friends who don't want complicated rules, because you can start playing Bananagrams and everyone knows how to spell a word, and make the words not together. So that's often a fun one for a group that aren't specifically game playing people.
Yeah, and it's a real-time game, which is it's one of the rare examples
Yes,
of everybody
you're
playing
racing.
at the same time, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
We wanted to recommend you for Terraforming Mars, the Planet Unknown game, where that you are terraforming a planet, and everybody on their turn turns the Lazy Susan, and they can choose from that pie slice of the Lazy Susan, which on your turn you can choose the resources that you want, but everybody else has to choose from the pie slice that is now right in front of them, because the player has turned it. So it's pretty cool. It's a really cool game, and I think you'd really like it.
Oh, that sounds great. Yes.
Yeah. Tailkin in chat says, I think Paperback was on Kickstarter too, combined with a relaunch of Typewriter. I backed it and got the games, but haven't played them. So
Tailkin, we need to get together and play games.
yeah.
Tailkin's often traveling. But the summer is long and full of gameplay.
Yeah, and we're traveling. Maybe we're traveling toward Tailkin at some point.
That would be fun.
In fact, I don't know if you ever use Board Game Arena, but my husband travels a lot. So sometimes we play a board game, but he's somewhere else. Do you know Board Game Arena? It's a mechanism. Yes.
Carlos,
Okay.
what is it? I mean, both of you can tell me. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's basically an online way to play board games together.
Kind of
Yes.
like Roll20, but instead of for TTRPGs,
That's exactly right.
for board games. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It is 8. We have talked this whole hour away. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very, very much.
This is so precious. I'm so excited to get the recording of this, and I'm so excited to be able to share it with everybody who couldn't make it tonight. But thank you, Tailkin, for coming and participating in the chat,
Yeah.
and other chats who've dropped in and out. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everybody. And I just want to remind everybody that Sign of the Dragon is available now. So you should get your hands on this beautiful volume.
If you go to my website, cscooney.com, or my Substack, cscooney.substack.com, I have all the links to Mary. You can also just Google Mary Soon Lee and go directly to her website, but links to her website, links to her books, links to her newsletter, which is, I'm sure you all want to subscribe to, but that should be very easy to find.
Thank you both. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Mary. Have a wonderful night.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.